It was a sunny afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Springfield, Kansas. 9-year-old Ethan Miller ran outside with a baseball glove in hand. His mother, Laura Miller, reminded him to be home before dinner. He smiled, nodded, and disappeared into the neighborhood streets. It seemed like an ordinary day, but it wasn't, because Ethan never came back. What began as a normal summer afternoon would turn into every parent's worst nightmare. Neighbors joined in calling his name, police searched the parks and fields, and volunteers combed through every corner of the town. But Ethan had simply vanished, as if dominance itself had sparked and allowed him to begin slipping through the long years. His family was left with nothing but unanswered questions, sleepless nights, and an empty chair at the dinner table. His father, David Miller, refused to give up hope. He chased every lead, followed every rumor, and prayed for a miracle. But the truth, the horrifying truth, was much closer than anyone dared to imagine. Because all along, Ethan was right there, just a few feet away, hidden in a place no one ever thought to look. Beneath the neighbor's dog kennel. The Miller family lived in a modest 2-story home in Springfield, Kansas. They weren't wealthy, but they were tight-knit. David Miller worked long hours at an auto shop, while his wife, LaVoice, devoid of laughter, her eyes devoid of warmth, younger sister, Sophie. Ethan was the kind of boy who made friends wherever he went. He loved baseball, adored his dog, and was known for a laugh that could fill an entire street. Teachers described him as curious, polite, and full of energy. To his parents, he was the light of their lives. To his sister, he was a hero. June 14, 2012, started like any other summer day. The sun was bright, the air warm, and the sound of sprinklers echoed through the neighborhood. Ethan had spent the morning drawing superheroes at the kitchen table before grabbing his baseball glove and running outside. He told his mom he'd be back before dinner. Laura smiled, reminding him not to wander too far. She had no reason to think those would be the last words she'd say to him that day. As the afternoon wore on, the neighborhood remained peaceful. Kids riding bikes, the smell of barbecues in the air. But as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Laura realized something wasn't right. Ethan wasn't back. Dinner was ready. His glove still lay in the yard. And the street was quiet. By 6 o'clock, Laura's calls grew frantic. She searched the yard, the sidewalks, and the nearby park. No answer. When David arrived home from work, he joined the search, running from house to house, pounding on doors, asking if anyone had seen his son. Neighbors dropped what they were doing to help. Dozens of people filled the streets, shouting Ethan's name into the fading evening light. But there was nothing, not a sound, not a trace. It was as if Ethan had stepped into the warm summer air and simply disappeared. Within an hour of Ethan's disappearance, the Springfield Police Department arrived on the scene. Patrol cars lined Miller's quiet street, their flashing lights casting eerie patterns across the homes. Officers questioned neighbors, canvassing every house, every garage, every backyard. But not one person could recall seeing Ethan after mid-afternoon. He had simply vanished into thin air. Detectives immediately set up a command post at the end of the block. Helicopters circled overhead. Search dogs were brought in to track Ethan's scent, but the trail ended abruptly at the edge of the Miller's yard. It was as though the boy had stepped outside his home and disappeared without leaving a single footprint. Dozens of volunteers from the community joined in, forming human chains across fields and wooded areas. Flashlights pierced the darkness as night fell, voices calling Ethan's name again and again into the still night air. Hours passed, then days, and still nothing. David Miller later recalled those first desperate nights, saying, "I remember thinking, he can't be far. He has to be here somewhere. But every time I called his name and got silent, it felt like a piece of me was dying." As days turned into weeks, investigators began to explore darker possibilities. Could Ethan have been abducted by a passing stranger? Was he the victim of a trafficking ring? Some speculated he might have run away, but at 9 years old, with no money and no plan, that theory made little sense. Still, without evidence, every possibility remained open. Every so often, just after midnight, faint noises carried across the street. Not the barking of dogs, but something else. Soft thuds, muffled cries, the kind of sound that made the hair on the back of David's neck stand up. When he told others, they shrugged it off. Probably the TV or the wind or his imagination. But David wasn't so sure. Then came the discoveries, small, chilling details no one else seemed to notice. A child's sock caught in the bushes near Gary's fence. A juice box crushed into the dirt behind the kennel. At first, David told himself there could be nothing. Coincidence. But the more he looked, the more he found. And with each discovery, suspicion hardened into obsession. David began to watch Gary in secret. From his living room window, from his car parked down the street, even during late-night walks where he pretended to be on his phone. And what he saw disturbed him deeply. Gary never allowed anyone near the kennel. Even when neighbors offered to help with the dogs, he refused. He padlocked the door every night, as though guarding something far more valuable than animals. To outsiders, it might have seemed like paranoia. A grieving father sees monsters in the shadows. But David's gut told him something was wrong, deeply wrong. And he was right, because behind those padlocks, beneath that kennel, and just a few yards from where Ethan had vanished, the terrible secret of Gary Watson's backyard was waiting to be uncovered. One warm summer night in 2020, David Miller made a decision he could no longer ignore. For years, his suspicions had gnawed at him, growing sharper with every strange sound, every unsettling clue. And now, with his neighbor Gary Watson away for the evening, David saw his chance. He crossed the street, heart pounding, every step pulling him closer to the truth he both dreaded and desperately needed. He slipped past the fence, the dogs strangely silent that night, and walked toward the massive wooden kennel. Up close, it loomed larger than he remembered, its chains glinting under the moonlight. The ground around it looked disturbed, as though it had been dug and filled again and again. With trembling hands, David pulled at the kennel's edge. First, nothing moved. Then, with a groan of wood and rusted bolts, the corner shifted. And beneath it, he saw something he never expected. A trapdoor, a hatch, hidden all these years under the dog's home. David forced it open. The stale air that rose up was damp and foul, carrying the unmistakable weight of a place sealed from the sun. He shone his flashlight inside, revealing a crude staircase leading into darkness. He descended, every step echoing in his ears. And there, in the corner of a dimly lit bunker, was his son. 8 years after vanishing, Ethan Miller sat huddled on the floor, his face pale, his body frail, his eyes shielded against the sunken light. He was alive, but broken, malnourished, terrified. His childhood stolen away in the shadows of a neighbor's yard. At that moment, time froze. A father's desperate search, a family's endless grief, a town's unanswered questions. Everything led to this. The boy they had mourned, the boy they had prayed for, had been right there all along. Beneath their feet, beneath the kennel, hidden in plain sight. David's hands trembled as he lifted his son into the night air. The boy clung to him, fragile, blinking against the world he had been denied for so long. David dialed the police with shaking fingers, and within minutes, flashing red and blue lights flooded the quiet street. Officers swarmed the property. They secured the bunker, documented every inch of the hidden chamber, and began the search for the man who had kept Ethan trapped for 8 long years. That man was Gary Watson, the quiet, solitary neighbor who had lived among them all this time. Gary's secrets unraveled quickly. Investigators uncovered journals filled with disturbing fantasies, proof of his obsession with control, and evidence of a meticulously planned abduction. He had created his own twisted world, where a stolen child was forced into silence and isolation. Gary was arrested that night, led away in handcuffs as the community looked on in shock. The man they had waved to for years, the man who kept to himself, had hidden the town's greatest tragedy right beneath their feet. But amid the horror, there was light, Ethan was wrapped in blankets, given medical care, and for the first time in almost a decade, held tightly by his mother and father. Tears flowed freely as the family embraced, a moment of grief mixed with the heavy knowledge of what had been lost. The road ahead would not be easy. Years of trauma could not be undone overnight. But Ethan was free. His family was whole again, and the nightmare that had haunted them for 8 long years was finally over. The Miller family's story is one of unimaginable pain, but also of resilience. For 8 years, they lived in uncertainty, grief without closure, hope without answers. And yet, they never stopped searching. A father's persistence uncovered what investigators had missed, and in the end, it brought his son home. This case is a haunting reminder of the dangers that can hide in plain sight. A neighbor, a familiar face, someone trusted, or at least unnoticed, can carry the darkest of secrets just a few steps away. Evil does not always lurk in distant shadows. Sometimes it lives right next door. Ethan's survival is a testament to human endurance, but his ordeal also highlights a crucial truth. In missing persons cases, persistence matters. Every flyer, every search party, every lead followed. Each one can be the difference between silence and discovery, between despair and hope. And perhaps the most unsettling lesson of all is this. Sometimes, the answers we search for are closer than we ever imagined. If you or someone you know suspects abuse or abduction, don't wait. Call and report to the people or organization that matters. Help can save a life. This is just one of countless chilling cases we uncover here on Criminal Reports. If you want more true crime stories that reveal the darkest secrets hiding in plain sight, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join us as we investigate the crimes that the world can't forget. Because on Criminal Reports, the truth is always more shocking than fiction.